So, hello everybody. My name is Richard Kennedy, and I am a lecturer here in TUS, and I lecture on the certificate in work or leadership and workplace health and well-being. And I am joined today by my fellow co-host, Mr. Dermot Mullenny, the greatest thing ever to come out of Offaly and to move to the west of the country. So, Dermot is he is the program lead for the Masters in Leadership in Workplace Health and Well-being. So, Dermot, welcome.
Thanks very much, Richie. It's great to be here.
So we are joined by, oh my God, have we got a special guest for you guys today? He is former Irish international goalkeeper. He is a Millwall living legend. He was the Barrytown Player of the Season 2002. Made that one up. And he is...
I was only there for about 10 games.
6 months. He's the co-founder of Pathfinder, which is a personal development and coaching consultancy. And recently he has become involved with the FAI with Stephen Kenny's backroom team as a wellness coach. So David Forde, welcome aboard.
How you doing, lads? How you doing, everyone? Great to be here. I'm really looking forward to the session. And like that, if it's anything to go by our past history, Richard, it should be very interesting.
Thank you, David. So I think I've never called you David before. So for this, I'll try and keep it somewhat professional. So this is to kick it off. Just looking at your current role, like I said in the intro, so with the FAI, what does it kind of encompass in terms of your role within the FAI?
In terms of what I do with the FAI, in terms of this conversation, it's limited in what I can kind of go into. However, as a high performance consultant, Stephen Kenny had the foresight, and he's a trailblazer. And we had a great connection from many years ago from our time at Derry City, and he revived my career. And now he asked me to come in and help him and help the team to assist in, the larger system of being a support member, as well as the other support staff to come in and to help the players, and not only the players, to help the staff, to help the coaches, to help everybody to bring that kind of best version of themselves to the table every week. Because like that, we're all inundated with our own burdens in life and everything else. So to come in and just to create that space, and a space of culture, and a space of cultural development, and to evolve it into getting the best out and maximizing everybody's potential, really, not just the players, but the staff and everyone else, because everyone's part of the whole, everyone's part of the wider system. And like that, one thing I've learned through my career is oftentimes we're all want the same thing. However, we just go about it doing it differently. So to align and attune minds and attune mindsets is part of the game. And that's a brief outside of what I do currently with the FAI.
Very good. Because I was just talking to Dermot earlier on. I was just saying about your role. Because I don't know of many clubs, both soccer or, here in Ireland, Gaelic football or hurling, that have a wellness, someone, a high performance consultant looks at the overall wellness, because we always have a physio, maybe a dietitian or a nutritionist, and even a psychologist. We all have individual roles just to kind of work on. But I think going back to Stephen Kenny and his foresight, to bring someone in like you, that's kind of, I suppose, the way I look at it is you're kind of connecting all the dots between the different facets that go into someone being not just perform well on the pitch, but feeling good about themselves. Because, I'm sure we're all well aware that the better you feel about yourselves and comfortable about yourselves and maybe clear about the direction that you're going to, perform better on the pitch, feel like you have more energy. If you are injured, more likely to recover in a shorter period of time. But so Stephen Kenny, and like you said, you went back, you spent time together at Derry. And what was it about Stephen Kenny that kind of made such a difference to you, Forde?
Stephen is a very deep man, a very measured man. And when I look back through my career and looking back in it now, wisdom but hindsight is a great thing. And to be able to learn from those experiences was everything, because knowledge, empowers us, and experience gives us an ability to use that. So when I look at how Stephen came back, and how nature brought us back into the same path again, from looking back that there was unfinished business, and we've always kind of said that. When I left West Ham at 24 years of age, that was a really difficult period, because like that, when we were at Barrytown together, and I'd spent 6 months there and had a really good time for those 6 months. However, leading up to the Christmas, and it was one of the first Christmases I was away from home, it was my biggest fear when I didn't go to the UK as a young man, like a lot of my friends did back in Galway. They went to various different clubs, but I never felt I had the courage to get across to the UK at that age. I was always very fearful of leaving Galway. And as one of the lads used to say to me, if I walked over to O'Brien's Bridge in Galway, I'd get a nosebleed. So to get across to Barrytown was a major step for me in that process. But I always felt that there was something driving within me. There was something in my soul telling me that, I want to play for Ireland, and my best way to get to Ireland is in the UK. So I had to make that plunge. I had to make that step. And through, my great time at Galway United in the League of Ireland, and I love the League of Ireland dearly. It was so good to me. And it was probably some of the fondest times that I had. Leaving was a very difficult thing to do, but there was just something in me that I had to get across to the UK. And thankfully I did. And I ended up at Barrytown. But all wasn't rosy and all wasn't well, because it was the first time I was away from home, missing family, missing friends. I was a massive FOMO, ringing home, and all the time you were being told that there was either a wedding or a party on our family do or christenings, and there was so much that I missed out in those stages, and I found very, very difficult. And it was coming up to the first Christmas, and my grandmother had just passed away probably 6 months earlier, who was a big, massive influence in my life, and I shared a lot of time and I lived with her quite a bit. So that was a really difficult experience. But it came to the Christmas, and I think you may remember the game well, Richard, when we played, I think it was Connah's Quay, live on TV on BBC Wales. And the funny thing about it, my best friend, Ryan Casey, who was a young young professional at Swansea City, just up the road, just up the M4 in Wales. And he was sat down watching the game with his mates at Swansea City, and he was saying, my mate from Galway is playing tonight, so let's watch the game. So it was first v second or second v third, and we were trying to, we were under pressure to win the game. And as the game wore on, I remember it, an incident that probably changed the trajectory of my career. And at the time, I felt it was the worst thing in the world. And what unfolded was the centre half played me back a ball and left it a bit short. I went to clear it, and it was a bit of a hospital ball. It wasn't even a 50-50. It was more like a 60-40 or a 70-30. Managed to ride the tackle, nearly got my leg broken, spun up in the air, landed on my back, jumped back up, and me and the centre half started having some words. And he pushed me, and I said, don't do that. And he pushed me again. He says, what are you going to do about it? Next thing, I let rip, right hand, right hook straight into the chin. Absolute bedlam, absolute carnage. Referee comes running in. Lads are, I can still see the look of shock on some of the players' faces that I've just chinned my own centre half. So the referee comes over, red card, straight off the pitch. And I walked, it's like the walk of shame all the way back to the change room. And I sat in that change room for 45 minutes. It was probably one of the most loneliest experiences that I've ever had. And I remember the team coming in afterwards after a win, and I was just sat there in the corner, and I was emotionally and mentally vacated the dressing room. Never mind that I totally mentally and emotionally vacated Cardiff, and I was back home in Ireland already, and people were just talking to me, and I wasn't in a space to absorb or take any of that information in, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. So roll on the dreaded Monday. And even that night, actually, the Saturday night, the doctor, she was a lovely lady. I think, can you remember her name?
Dr. Liz.
Liz, yeah. Dr. Liz, yeah. She came and paid me a visit because she was concerned about my mindset and where I was actually at, because I was lower than the snake's belly. So anyhow, roll on Monday, the manager, Kenny Brown, calls me into the office, and he started talking to me. He says, look, this isn't acceptable. I have to fine you a couple of weeks' wages. I've never seen the likes of it before. To chin your own teammate live on TV. You've just been brandished with an 8-game ban. And I was just thinking, whoa, this couldn't get any worse. But I'd already made my mind up. I just turned around and I said, look, Kenny, I said, I'm heading back to Ireland anyhow, no problem. It takes me 2 weeks' wages. And I've never seen a bigger handbrake turn in all my life. He just squeezed the handbrake. And he said, whoa, don't do anything rash here. Don't do anything rash. It's not the end of the world. He said, look, there's loads of clubs watching you. West Ham are, wanted to take you on down for 10 days. Coventry were here watching you. Portsmouth were here. Millwall were here. And the funny thing about it is, Richard, is that And Dermot, is that all those clubs that were there watching me, Stoke, they were a part of the journey that I would have later on in my career. So, if it's meant to be, it won't pass you by. And if it is, it's just they're waiting for you. And that's what taught me over that whole experience. So anyhow, I found myself probably a half an hour later going down to the 39 Craddock Avenue. Used to call it the Big Brother house. And it was a Big Brother house. Even the rats had to wear overcoats. So we were in the house, and I was packing my bag, and next thing I found myself jumping in Kenny Brown's Mercedes, and we're lacing it down the M4, and we find ourselves in East London, drops me off at the hotel, and we got my bags packed in and went down to the training ground to meet Glenn Roeder, the manager, and meet all the players and stuff at Chadwell Heath. And it was a great time at West Ham, because it was in one of their golden eras when Paolo Di Canio was there, Trevor Sinclair, David James, Thomas Repka, had a whole array, Michael Carrick, Joe Cole. It was a phenomenal team at that time. It was kind of the best of the rest. They'd finished 7th in the league that year. And here I am coming to go down and train with them for 10 days. So I arrive at the training ground in Chadwell Heath, and the manager pulls up Kenny Brown, and he turns around to me and he says, by the way, he says, don't tell anyone you got sent off for chinning your own player. Keep that one quiet. So I said, yeah, I said no more. Anyway, jumped out of the car, went into trained, picked up my kit, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Walked out onto the pitches, and they were absolutely manicured, and it was like walking out onto old Wembley. So 3 days rolled on, and next thing, Glenn Roeder pulls me into the office, and he says, I really like what I see. You've so much potential, and we want to sign you. I couldn't believe it. I nearly fell off the chair. The excitement, the rush that just came into my body, all I could think about was ringing home, ringing my parents, ringing my friends. And even they were astonished and astounded that, such 1 minute, like what I said, it was the worst thing in the world, turned into the best thing in the world. But the moral of the story is, don't go around chinning people, because that necessarily doesn't always come out with them types of outcomes. But that's always been the way in my career and in my life, is that sense of volatility and uncertainty, and then that tumultuous being that, some of the greatest strifes and the greatest downfalls has been my greatest victories. So I managed to spend 3 years at West Ham, which was an amazing experience, a very lonely time, and I had to sit with myself a lot and you've experienced that as well as a professional footballer, Richard. So dealing with those internal conflicts and those insecurities and a lot of fear, but yet at the same time doing something that you deeply love was so conflicting. It was a difficult thing to understand and try to process through that yourself, where there wasn't someone like me now, say, working with the players within Ireland. There was never that type of support. Like what you were saying, there was always the support of physios looking after your body on a physical level, stretching your body and, doing those strength and conditioning. And that was just the start of strengthening and conditioning and diets and changing alcohol and everything at that period. So what it taught me then over the years was that, there is a space and a place for understanding the mind. And as a performance coach or a high performance consultant, whatever name or label you want to put on it, it's about stretching the mind. The mind is like a muscle. And when we stretch the mind to the right point, like any muscle, you bring it to that edge to heal it and repair, to make it stronger and make it grow bigger. So that's really what my whole experience in football has taught me, was that we can expand ourselves, we can grow past our comfort zones, we can step past our fear. And when we challenge it in the right space, to become fearless and to really enjoy and love what you do, that's really what the whole journey is about. And going back to our earlier point, was when I did come home from West Ham with me tail between my legs, that feeling of a failure and a feeling of disappointment and totally disillusioned, totally out of the game in terms of football. I was going to pack it in. I was going to return and play Gaelic football, which is a huge draw of mine. I used to love playing centre midfield for my local club, St. Michael's in Galway, and a huge dream was to play for Galway in Croke Park. So I thought, right, this is my pathway forward, and to return to university, NUIG in Galway as a mature student and become a teacher and go back to my old school, the Bish, where Jimmy Brennan used to be the head of Irish school soccer team, was a huge mentor for me during my childhood and stuff. So spoke with him and he said, yeah, that's a good plan. That's a good idea. Managed to get myself into NUIG and start to study arts, which was geography, history, sociology, politics, and philosophy. And at the time, I hadn't got a clue anything about philosophy and deities and all this, the study of the mind. And I thought, wow, this is blowing me mind here. And then years later, how I found myself in that space and absolutely, adoring what the mind actually is. So in the meantime, Stephen Kenny was just being appointed as Derry City manager. And at the time, I think he was only 32 or 33. He's one of the youngest managers in League of Ireland. And looking back, how young I was on myself, you always see your manager or your leader as someone that's old and mature and stuff. And then you don't realize there's actually not really a whole lot between us in terms of age. And back then he had a full head of black hair. And so he came down to Galway to meet me. Stephen O'Brien from Longford Digger was a goalkeeper and he said, look, there's a young goalkeeper from Galway, returned from West Ham, and I think he'll be very good for you. So he came down and met me in Galway, drove all the way down from Derry and asked me about would I be interested to come and play with Derry. And at the time, I'd kind of said no. I'm done with football. And he said, look, just come and play for the last 10 games of the season. So his ability to persuade me was massive, and how he, his ability to use football in the best possible way and his way and view of football and how it should be played just penetrated and sowed a seed inside my mind that I thought, right, let's give this a shot and give this a go. So Stephen was a very emotionally intelligent man and very self-aware, and he knew his ambition. He knew what he wanted to do and what he wanted to achieve. And for the first time, probably in my career, I've met someone that wanted to invest in me properly and wholly.
Do you mind if I ask the incident you mentioned, the red card? What age were you at that stage?
21.
21. So that's very young to be dealing with such I suppose, a public outcry about something that happened on a football pitch. And as you're talking there, I was thinking about, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Ian Holloway who used the term bounce back ability for the first time? I think he might have introduced it in a Sky interview. But I was thinking about resilience. So, like, it's an extraordinary thing at 21 to be able to come back from such, I suppose, a seminal moment in your personal life and your professional life. So this idea of resilience it has kind of a mythical quality these days. We talk about it, but it's very hard to kind of put a definition on what it is. In your work then with the professional players at the moment, be it with Republic of Ireland or wherever, is that something you, I suppose you can teach? Is it something you can learn, or is that just something that's in you?
No, I definitely think it's something that can be learned. And I definitely think it's something that it's innate nature that's actually within you. Where I feel is a lot of the time where we lose our sense of resilience is that oftentimes we feel unsupported. We don't have that unconditional support, that no matter what we do or what we say, that it will be taken in the right context and the right terms and not judged or not criticized or not analyzed. And if you have someone in your life like that you can support, and luckily for me, I had great mentors and great coaches and great teachers coming through my youth. And they were just working out of their experience. And it wasn't until I got to the older ages of probably my early 30s and I realized that I needed more, and I seeked out someone to come and mentor me from that place, to bring that to me to the next level, the next dimensions within myself, and to unfold that, to allow me to blossom and to flourish. And when you do get that, all of a sudden now you've got someone to support you in the right way, to nurture you. You know, it's like my dad always said, when I was leaving after the first year and a half, I think at Derry, there was a few clubs interested in me, and we just got beaten down in Cork. And this is another story about Stephen, and it's a testament to the man himself. And we just got beaten in Cork the first season, down in Turner's Cross, 2-0 or 2-1. And all we needed was a draw that day to win the whole league. So we ended up losing the league on goal difference, I think, in the end to Cork City. And that was an absolute gut wrencher. And I remember my dad and my mum came down to the game, my uncle Johnny, God bless him. And my dad was out the back at the hotel, the Rochestown Hotel, on the day after, the Saturday morning. We'd stayed over the night before, and there was a bit of a party and stuff like that. So the team bus for Derry was loaded up. Stephen and the boys were heading back up to Derry. I was in the car with my parents heading back up to Galway. And the bus stopped, and out jumped Stephen Kenny and ran back about 50, 100 yards. And he came up to me dad, who was leant over, the worse for wear, leant over a barrier, having a cigarette, fag hanging off his lip. And he said, Mr. Forde, he said, I have to say, he said, thanks a million. He said, your son this year has been tremendous. He's been, absolutely, great for the team and great for everyone else. And you should be dead proud of him and stuff like that. And he shook my dad's hand and jumped back onto the bus. And it wasn't until months later that my dad had actually told me that story and what happened, because Shelburne and a few clubs in England were kind of sniffing around again. And I had an opportunity to leave Derry. And I was talking to my dad and I said, look, Dad, I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, look, son, he said, the grass isn't always greener. And I thought, right, that's fair enough. That's kind of fairly common wisdom. However, the add-on to it was, and where the gravy lied in it, was the fact that he said, it's only greener where it's watered and where it's nourished, and how we nourish people and how we surround people with that. So when we have that type of support, it can nourish, it can feed, it can fertilize that resilience within us. And when you look at resilience, and for resilience for me was the bounce back ability. And when Ian Holloway was such a character, and I'm sure we'll get to talk to him about later on in the talk. But when you look at bounce back ability for a goalkeeper, one of the things I always say to my clients and to my people and to my teams and anyone I work with is, we fall 10 times, we get up 11. If you fall 20 times, you get up 21. As a goalkeeper, you always had to get back up. You always had to get back onto your feet and be prepared and ready for the next shot, or be prepared and ready for the next game. My mentor, when he met me, he said some of the wisest things to me. And one of the things he said to me, he said, look, David, he says, when you lose your courage, or you lose your confidence many times, but never lose your courage. And if you've courage, you'll get through it. And if you're brought to it, you'll be brought through it. And that's really what resilience is for me, is that ability to fall down and get back up and learn from the experience, learn from what that experience is actually teaching you, not to shy away from it, not to avoid it, not to accommodate it, to work through it and work through the fear that's associated with that. And it's the fear that suppresses us and keeps us down in that space and keeps us small within ourselves, and not really realizing that there's a giant within us.
One of the courses that we run in TUS is about, Richie introduced it at the start, it's workplace health and well-being. And your workplace as professional footballers is pretty extraordinary, but even as a goalkeeper within that workplace, it's on a different level still. And as I suppose the only non-footballer in the call, from my perspective, it seems like an extraordinary way to live your life. Constantly living with, the fear of making a mistake, judgment, the anxiety, the ruthlessness of your career. It seems like that's baked into what you do on a daily basis. So can you recall any times when you experienced burnout in your career, where maybe you thought, I just can't do this anymore. I feel emotionally fatigued. I feel physically fatigued. I feel a sense of sort of depersonalization. And I just, I can't do it anymore because I can't face the daily grind.
Yeah, the first time I felt that was probably that sense of disillusionment, and when I got really disheartened and left West Ham for the first time. And out of that sense of burnout, out of feeling really negative and your energy really low, that I was just totally burnt out. But at the time, I didn't really understand that. I didn't have the awareness around it, or anybody to explain that to me or to bring me through that process. The second time that happened to me in my career is like that. Once we do evaluate burnout from the right place. And burnout is, when it's viewed correctly, is a good place to be, because it's a starting point. It's a point that we can't actually get lower. And in my world and my language, I like to use the dark night of the soul. When you can't get any lower, you can't get any darker, that all you need is some light, and the light of information and the love of creation to stimulate that drive within yourself to realize that, right, like what we said, use that level of resilience to bounce back and actually, put forth the goals and your aspirations and your dream to achieve what you can achieve, and start working towards that. The second time that probably happened to me in terms of burnout was when I got to about 30, 31. And it was a really difficult period for many numerous reasons. One was because I had been carrying a lot of baggage with me up until that point, and I hadn't actually dealt with it. And like that, it started to come to the surface. It started to saturate my whole being, and it started to come out. As much as I tried to suppress it and push it down into my subconscious and unconscious, it just kept coming forth in terms of how I was acting and how I was behaving within changing rooms, and having that level of frustration within me was a very difficult thing to do, because one thing it actually made me was extremely angry and extremely frustrated. And that wasn't my nature. That wasn't the person I actually was. But through the expectations, and like what you said, through the burden of expectations of winning and achieving and all those different elements and getting to the top, it does create a really ruthless environment, as we said. And when you get into a ruthless type of environment, it's very unforgiving. And unforgiving from the sense of you're either ruthless and unforgiving to others, or else you're unforgiving to yourself, and others will be actually ruthless to you. And especially within a changing room and a team type of an environment and a team dynamics, if you have that going on internally, that type of internal conflict, you're guaranteed your external world will be full of chaos also. And I found myself in, energetically and understanding energy from the space I do today, was that Millwall had a stigma and had a type of energy around that where, we fear no foe, and it was us against the rest of the world. And there was often times I fed into that massively, because that's the kind of space and the mentality that I was actually in at that time. But then, being a number one for a club like Millwall is, I often say it, there's probably 4 or 5 clubs in the whole of the UK. You could actually, if you could play for them 4 or 5 clubs, I believe you could probably play for anyone. And oftentimes when I first signed for Millwall, my old goalkeeping coach, Tony Burns, whose dad's from Cork, often said to me, he said, have you got your hard hat on today? And that was the type of environment that every week you had to get ready and prepare to go out in front of the fans, and to go out in front of the press, go out in front of the media, and turn up and do your best, no matter what was going on for you internally. So when I look back at how ruthless I actually was to myself, and how unforgiving I was to myself, that led to a lot of what was happening externally to me. And it wasn't until I worked through those dimensions within myself and worked through those, I suppose, demons within myself, then everything started to change from that perspective and that point of view. Then all of a sudden I started to look at, right, how can I mind and protect my energy? And the work I do with people now is through understanding the body, understanding energy, understanding awareness, and understanding the mind. And when you amalgamate all those things, then you start to illuminate, you start to beam, because when you get past and you start to understand that there's a balance between how you can be active and achieve what you want to do, but if you keep your foot on the pedal, if you keep your foot on the accelerator, and the revometer is up around 7,000-8,000 feet, all of a sudden the engine will blow. And that's pretty much like our mind, and our mind works the same way. So I had to learn techniques in terms of how can I rest, recuperate, regenerate, to bring my, a sense of positivity in, but understanding that my energy might be quite low, into how can I get into the high performance states of having high energy and having a sense of positivity. Because for so long in my career, I was the other side of the spectrum, and that other side of the spectrum was just in pure survival mode. being highly charged energetically, but being extremely negative and blaming and complaining and all these different things, that nothing was ever right. I was doing the best job in the world, but yet the balls weren't right. The pitch isn't right. So many different types of excuses that I was actually feeding them. So what that taught me was I was just in survival mode. I was just trying to survive my environment, survive my circumstances.
I was reading recently a guy, I think his name is Bruce Deisler. He was the head of Twitter in Europe. And he was talking about burnout in his company, in Twitter in the early days, and the culture sort of changed. And he talked about, finding solutions to that. One of them was, I think you've talked about it already, is this kind of social connections and social support. And you've mentioned that. But the other aspect then he talked about was the sense of control. So for somebody in a regular job, that might be looking at your Monday morning schedule and seeing, a day of Zoom meetings or a day of just, answering emails, or just feeling like, gosh, this is, I'm not looking forward to what's ahead of me because I have no control over over what I have to do. So I suppose reading around you and your kind of public interviews and so on, and what you've said already, and speaking to Richie, you've obviously gone through like a hell of a journey from where you started out to where you are now. Was part of that about kind of regaining control over your own life? Was that kind of central to your thinking when you move, in towards, shamanism and meditation and all these things that you've spoken publicly about before?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting word, control. And control is something that I had to really look at in depth. And when I started to realize that I'm actually not in control of a whole lot. All I can control is how I can respond in any given set of circumstances, in any situation. To choose my attitude is the only way I can actually have any sense of empowerment in that space. And one thing that taught me about going on my journey, that meditation and pranayama and various different techniques, whether it was traveling to India, into the Himalayas and spending time with yogis and babas and doing water ceremonies and fire prayers and many different things to help me through that process, and actually understand that the first path in any situation is actually realizing that we're actually in control of actually nothing. The first path, and the path is of change. And that when we can look at change from a point of view is how we'll actually try to control situations. And when we don't have a sense of control within ourselves, we'll try to control other words around us, because control really is about having a sense of power. And a lot of anxiety that caused in me, and look at that anxiety, was times that I felt powerless and uncertain. That used to bring up huge levels of performance anxiety with me, or even huge bouts of acute anxiety. So I started to look at deeply about control, and how, whether I was at home in my situation with my wife and children, and that sense of base and the foundation, how that needs to be solid in terms of how you want to go on and have a career at the best level in anything that you want to achieve and do. So I looked at a pretty simple concept of you either transfer or you transform. And when you transform energetically from that point of view, that you're not transferring a sense of control onto others, and you're giving them their sense of freedom and their sense of naturalness within themselves, then all of a sudden you start to actually realize that, look, once you surrender to that space, that great change starts to come from that place. And looking at change, one of the greatest fears in myself, and a great fear in people, is actually the fear of change, and the fear of wanting to, step into zones and places that they're uncertain about, because they don't know what that actually holds, and it keeps them controlled. It keeps people small. It kept me small in my mindset. So it wasn't until I came to understand nature, and started to understand nature as a whole, and understanding my nature, then I started to realize that everything is cyclical. Everything is going to happen naturally. And if we can get into that flow state within ourselves, then we start to synchronize, our minds start to synchronize, and we start to become in step with nature. So these great teachings that I've been taught down through the years, since probably I turned 31 around that time, since I was under that severe pressure as Ireland's number one, as Millwall's number one, having a young family, having a wife, expectations, press, media, all those different things, as we said, just started to close in on top of me, and I didn't have any space within myself. So to gain that space, I had to go and look at alternative methods and actually discover what was it that I needed to look at. What was it here that wasn't adding up? I was doing the best job in the world, but I wasn't enjoying myself. I'd lost the fun in it. And that was the key for me, was understanding fun and enjoyment. And if we don't find the enjoyment in it, then we won't do what we love, and we won't love what we do. So there was a huge part in that.
Forde, I just ask you finally, look, I appreciate, look, we're getting 50 odd minutes into it. Just kind of finally, I suppose, just touch on that change piece again, because it can be different. Obviously, you're the person that was looking to, you met a mentor, you're looking to make some changes in your life. But how do the people, say the people closest to you, adapt to you changing, or adapt to you going about a different path in, I suppose, maybe spiritually, or the way you wanted to go? Wife, family, kids, cousins, whatever. Like, sometimes other people change. You can find it hard to adapt to those changes themselves.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. And a lot of the time is that when you start bringing change in, is people that are close to you do not want to look. They don't want to see that they have to change. Now, all of a sudden, it brings in a whole different shift and a whole different dynamic in terms of how you're going to navigate that change. And oftentimes when you do find, and like that, I've been blessed with the teachings and the support that I received, is that you want to share that with your nearest and dearest. And what I found out of that level of enthusiasm and curiosity that I actually had was that I overstepped my own boundaries and overstepped my own spaces into others. And it was just to help them what I had actually found. And sometimes, it's all about timing. It's all about understanding that it mightn't be for them at that time or that space. Whether they ever get to it, who knows? This was a journey about self and about my change. Then you start to actually realize that, how people hold us in spaces, how people view us from traditional behaviors and traditional legacies, and they'll always see us from that space without, looking at the evolvement in yourself. And it's really, for myself, when I came to it, understanding that it was not just an involution that was going on within me internally, it was an evolution for what was going on externally for myself, in terms of, like what you said, family, friends, and everything else. And for me, it was this is about my journey. And that's not coming at it from a selfish place or a self-centered place. That comes at it from a selfless place. Because if you can't be the best version of yourself, if you can't be who you are, your authentic self, how can you be authentic and how can you be yourself to everybody else? Then you're living in a sense of a lie. And I no longer wanted to live in that space. I wanted to expand past that and to be myself, because I was so afraid. I had so many fears within myself that kept me small. And it was only myself. It was only my own ego, and ego is everyone's greatest obstacle. And that obstacle was myself. It was nobody else. But yet I went around and I blamed, everybody, that it was everybody's fault that I was in certain positions within myself, till I started to take that ownership of myself, and I started to own that in myself and take responsibility for me. And it was only when I started to identify, and awareness is a superpower, and I started to recognize the dysfunctions or to the abnormalities within myself, that I started to see that I could coordinate that and integrate that into my future vision of how I wanted to live my life and to bring the best for me and my family.
David,
sorry, Dermot, go on. If you want to...
Yeah, no, I was just fascinated to listen to you there, David. In that change, in that transition that you spoke about, did you lose people along the way? And did you have to lose people? Did you have to cut people from your life because of this personal journey you were going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you a very funny story. I was in London one day, and I'd met with my mentor, and I was going through some things with some relationships and different things. And one of the things was I was having great difficulty. Was it was around the time WhatsApp had come out, and it might have been a bit after that. And I was on groups, a team group and stuff like that. And there were certain things I wasn't best pleased about on the group and what people were sharing and stuff. And that was going against my nature. And I was betraying myself so many times in that. And then I realized how many times we betray ourselves all the time. And I betrayed myself all the time just to feel part of something, just to feel belong, just to feel that sense of inclusion. And not really knowing that I had choices and I had other options and other alternatives. So the group messaging was going on, and I spoke to him and I said, look, this is what's happening. There's certain things on the thing that I'm not too pleased about. And he said, right, David, right, understand. So he says, right, come on, let's go. So we finished up a coffee and we walked outside. And he said, I was standing on the side of the footpath, and he said, David, by the way, he says, stand up there. So I stood up. And he said, shake side to side. He started going like this, wiggle your hips like this. So I'm there and I'm wiggling my hips from side to side. And he said, by the way, he says, do you feel anything banging off the inside of your legs? And I went, boom, I got it. In other words, grow a pair. Step into it and grow a pair. So went straight onto the app and I went, right, this isn't good for me. This isn't good for my mindset and my mental health and my emotional well-being and all those different things that oftentimes we find ourselves caught up in and not knowing that we had any choices. And I found great freedom from that. And I realized that, look, it's even around your language and terminology of losing people. We lose people all the time and we gain people all the time. So it's what you're willing to sacrifice to what you lose to what you gain. It's what you're going to gain rather than what you're going to lose. And it's how we view that. That's what the essence was. That's what the key was. And so what I gained in that space was I gained a part of myself back.
Very good. Very good. Dermot, will we wrap it up at that?
I think, but look, I could happily chat for another hour or two, David, but I say you're a busy man and it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Yeah, lads, look, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed today and I'm greatly honoured and I greatly appreciate it and that you invited me on today. And like that, I enjoyed myself too. So look, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and for anyone that's listening out there, have a Happy New Year. And until we meet again, guys, have a good one.
Forde, thank you very much. Absolute legend. Much appreciated. Happy Christmas to all you, Alison, and all the kids and the family. Back in Torlochmore.
Call you a boo.
Call you a boo, boy.